The film doesn't lie. And it says that Rueben Bain Jr. is a destructive force and a top 5 player in the draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. I'm an NFL draft analyst with Bleach Report. That's my guy, Keith Sanchez. He's the director of scouting with the Draft Network and 2019 national champion with the LSU Tigers. And as always, thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen of the day. And thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in America. It's all because of you guys. Rueben Bain Jr., destructive, physical, violent, a lot of different adjectives you can throw on to describe Mr. Bain Jr. We're going to break down his game in totality, the pros, the cons, and we're going to close out the show with explaining the grade and give you some NFL comps that we have come up with and thought about. But let's get into it, Keith. I always ask this question, Keith, ever since we started these last week. Rueben Bain Jr., for you, what's the A trait? What's that superpower that's going to allow him to be successful in the NFL?
Man, and since you've been asking that question, DP, I always go with two different vibes, right? I go with a tangible and an intangible, right? Yep. I go with a physical part and I go with a mental part. And I think I'm going to keep in sync with those past couple episodes, and I'm going to go with something that's the mental part of it, right? And I think for Rueben Bain, it's about the violent temperament that he consistently plays with, right? And I think that when you're talking about setting a tone and a culture changer, this is what you want in a football player, right? So you look at the top end of the draft and some of these teams that have bad defenses, right? Let's go as high as number 2, the New York Jets, right? Needing defensive prowess and needing to change the mentality of the defense, right? Rueben Bain is that, because he brings high energy, he brings relentless effort, he brings violent temperament, he brings a motor, right, that runs hot all the time, and he wants to physically impose his will on you, right? And you've seen that in multiple games. You've seen the Texas A&M game. You've seen that in the national championship game. You've seen that in the game, I think, against Ohio State, right? Like big time moments, he shows up, right? And there's always been a question about the sack production and things like that. We'll get to that in the next segment. So that's the first part. The first part is the mental. The second part to me, DP, I think, is you automatically get an elite run defender, right? And then if you want to add in a third trait, I think the pass rush upside is there for him to float somewhere around being a double-digit sack guy in the NFL.
No, I agree with a lot of that, Keith. I think the temperament. I always go back to that week 1 game against Notre Dame and how he's in class, writing out expletives on his notebook about Jeremiah Love, about the Fighting Irish. Like he's one of those players, Keith, that great athletes know how to psych themselves up for a game, right? They know how to take anything as disrespect. They know how to listen. Tom Brady did it. If you said anything that wasn't pleasing to Tom, he just took it as disrespect, used it, and different things of that nature. You talked about that Texas A&M game, right? That was the game where I think was it Trey Zune? I think is the left tackle from Texas A&M, who went to the media like, we're not. I think he made a comment about they weren't worried about Rueben.
Yeah, like we believe in what we're doing in our scheme.
Yeah,
or something like
and
that.
I'm like, I would not have said that. Like, I would just have left that alone. Like, hey guys, he's a great player, but we trust what we do. We trust what the coaches said, what our offensive line coach has done for us. We're going to trust the training and what we have. Put it more highlighting that you trust yourselves. Don't say that we're not worried about Rueben Bain Jr. because he's been one of the best players in college football all season. So just for that aspect, I completely agree with you that mentality, you have to be wired a different way to want to dominate physically, impose your will, and know that you can do it. That's the thing. He knows he can do it, and he wants to do it every single snap. But to your point, you talk about the run defense. He's going to set hard edges. He's going to make it hard for running backs to bounce out. I think it was against Ohio State. They tried to run in his direction, and they tried to double team on zone blocks. He parts the Red Sea, tackles the running back for a loss, like sets a hard edge. Not just against tackles. This isn't a guy. If you don't have a George Kittle a Rob Gronkowski type blocker as a tight end in the NFL, don't put a tight end on that side. Let's go strong side to the other direction, across the formation. Let's put that tight end. But I think for me, Keith, when I look at him, his best trait to me. Yeah, go ahead.
No, because I want you to explain the pass rush ability, right? Because I know we're going to get to that in the cons, right? Because that's a big question mark. We're going to talk about the pass rush upside, and also I know we're going to talk about the length in the cons, right? But I want to talk about the upside of the pass rush ability that you see. So I want to ask you, on film, what do you see to be able to project him to be a top 5, top 3 player, and for some people, maybe the number 1 player in the class?
Okay, so I think I can't remember which Schwartz it was. Is either Mitchell or Jeff, one of the former offensive linemen. They said that this is probably a couple months ago. They made a comment about how NFL tackles don't fear speed as much as people think they do. They fear guys that can run through them, like a Jared Verse, like those power rushers. When your guy can like strike you and move you, that's what fears them the most, because it's like I'm a grown man. I'm 315, 20 pounds. That shouldn't be happening. When I look at the pass rush ability of Rueben Bain, he's heavy-handed. So you see the heavy hands. He has well-placed strikes. He knows how to soften and open up angles to the quarterback. So in terms of like, especially how Miami used them, you see the hand usage. You see, if you watch any of they show the pregame stuff of him working out with, for those who don't know, his defensive line coach, him and Anakeem Messidor's, is Jason Taylor, the Hall of Fame edge rusher from the Miami Dolphins. And you see him going through bag drills and hand drills and how like refined he has to be with his hands. So he has good hand usage, good hand placement. He's got that power. He's got speed to power. This is a guy that gives you, and for me, he like for 275, almost 280 pounds, he's got a quick first step off the ball.
Yeah, and that's what I put in my scouting report, that he actually has an explosive first step, I believe.
Yeah, like, so it's like, well, what if I dropped him into like 265? Like, how much quicker would that first step get, right? But for him, it's like, I can run through you. I can work across face, right, with inside counters. But also, as a wide 9 guy, I can still get around you. That first step quickness, he has enough bend to be able to corner and still get to the quarterback. And I think that's the thing for me, is that he's a multi-faceted pass rusher. And then at 275, 280 pounds, you want to do hey, we reduce you down into a 3-point stance and 4-eye you. I can do that as well. He knows how to get to the quarterback with power, with speed, with quickness, but also with good hand usage.
Yep, I agree with that. I'm going to wrap this up with talking about his versatility. Like I said, I know there's going to be a other side of this coin that we're about to get into the next segment, but I look at the upside for his versatility, and with him being 275, potentially 280, 285, depending on what the pregame meal was that day, right? Right. And applying it to the X's and O's and understanding something, right? Like when you have somebody that's 280 pounds, that's the same as some defensive tackles, right? The Dallas Cowboys like 280-pound defensive tackles, right? But I'm looking at it from the upside of that, right? Is that you talked about it, his strength, his overall mass, that now when I get into the schematics, right, and you think about those defensive coordinators that are really creative in what they do and what they can apply, right, I can kick Rueben Bain down, right, and put him at a 3-tech, put him at a 4, anything like that, and then bring in another speed rusher, right, and let's apply it to this class in my example, right? If you have Rueben Bain, and let's say you went and drafted Romello Height and you was able to get him in the 2nd and 3rd round, right? On pass rushing downs, you can kick Rueben Bain down inside, right? And then bring in Romello Height and let him be the speed edge rusher off the edge. Now, why is it important that Rueben Bain is 280 pounds, and why can't you do that with any speed rusher? Because quarterbacks have the opportunity to make checks, right? And let's say if you had a 245-pound edge rusher that decided to get into a 3-tech or a 4-eye or something like that, a heavy run team is going to check to run. We're going to dual block that. We're going to double team to the next level, and we're going to pick up the 3rd and 5 by running the football, right? And so Rueben Bain being that size can actually be an asset, because it has to keep offenses in a way. honest, right? To where it's like, okay, we can't just run the football and get out of here. We're going to have to really scheme some stuff up. And also it allows you to bring another edge rusher off the bench, right? To really get things going. Even I think about the Chicago Bears, right? Where how they have Montez Sweat, right? But then you draft Rueben Bain, he plays the other side, you kick him down, and then now you're able to bring in Austin Booker consistently, right? As the designated pass rusher. So there are a multitude of different things that you can do with Rueben Bain. I think that he's proven. And I was one of the guys, so that's why I'm addressing this, right? I was one of the guys like, I need to see more, right? Coming into the season, I needed to see more. But I think he's proven that he's a high floor prospect, right? That he has a couple things in his back pocket that at least I'm getting this. And I think when it comes down to draft, when you hit only on 50% of draft prospects, right? Like that's the historic data, that only 50% work. I think you look at this young man and you feel good about it. But DP, listen. We're doing these scouting reports, right? And we always say we're going to talk about both sides of the coin, right? We're going to talk about the pros, but we're also going to talk about the cons and the concerns. And Rueben Bain has been one of those polarizing prospects where people have been all in. People have had a lot of concerns about him. Let's talk about the concerns and what we think about Miami edge rusher / interior defensive lineman, Rueben Bain.
If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates, faster and more efficiently. Spend more time interviewing the candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it with Indeed. Breaking down the concerns for Miami defensive lineman, pass rusher, edge rusher, Rueben Bain Jr. That's what we're getting into next, guys. Thanks for being an everydayer with us. If you want the show ad-free, go check out the Everydayer Club and consider becoming a member. Go to LockedOnNFLDraft.supercast.com. The cons, the concerns, Keith. I think the number one concern that everyone has is the arm length. What is his actual arm length, right? I think he was supposed to be in Mobile, him and David Bailey and a couple other guys, and they played a long season. They backed out and everything.
That's the insight that I got, that it had nothing to do with competition. It was a long season, right? And they were like, listen, we feel good about our draft stock, but it was a long season and wanting to get their bodies together and get it right.
Yeah, 100%. And it makes sense, right? Like, you just had a long season. Let me rest my body, get ready for the combine, get ready for pro day season. Individual workouts and all that stuff is coming up. So I think Rueben Bain, we won't get that verified number until 2 weeks at the combine, Keith. And I think the arm length shows up at times, I would say, as a finisher of sacks, right? Like, he gets into the back. He, per PFF, like from a number standpoint, he ended up having 12 sacks on the season. He really hit that stretch. Like, I think that Pittsburgh game on down, like, he just, like, Pittsburgh was his last regular season game, and then Texas A&M through the playoffs. He had 68 pressures on the season. He gets into the backfield. He lives in the backfield, but the reason why you have 68 pressures, but you only have 12 sacks, the arm length shows up when he gets to that point when you're talking about rushing on the outside, running the arc, running the corner, and then you have a tackle trying to wash you around that quarterback. If you got a quarterback that has any semblance of pocket presence, they typically try to step up and replace where you just displaced. So then when you try to reach out and grab the guy, if you don't have that arm length, you might get a hand on, but you can't get like full hands on. I think back to that rush, it was like week 1 against Notre Dame, and he dips and bends around the left tackle. And I think CJ Carr, that was his first start, he was able to get out right before Rueben Bain could get his hands on him. And it's like, yeah, maybe if you had 33.5, 34-inch arms, maybe you're able to convert that situation. But I think that, to me, at the top of his rush or right before he can close, I feel like he does miss sometimes because he's just out of reach because he doesn't have the superb wingspan and arm length.
Yeah, no, and it will show up on film, right? The arm length, but I think for both of us, it's less of a concern because of all the other areas that he can win, right? And I think if he was just a speed rusher, right, and it just triggered him using his arm length and having to be precise hand counters, but because he's so strong and powerful, I think he even breaks through some of the initial punches by the offensive lineman, right? And that's where the arm length comes to the conversation, is that the lineman can get hands on you before you can get hands on him, right? Like that's where the arm length concern comes in. The concern that I think about, right, is and what I had coming into the season, and like I said, I think he dispelled / answered some of those questions. Was we talked about the quick / explosive first step off of the football. For me, it was the top end speed to consistently win around the edge and win around the arc, right? Like, is he that caliber athlete to be able to consistently threaten around the edge? That's the question that I had. And I think that if I had to give it a grade now, right, I would probably give it somewhere around a B-. I think it's good, not great. But like we talked about, the power element that's added to this, then that's where we go, with the conversation of, okay, does it offset and kind of balance itself out, right? And then also with him being a fairly good athlete, well, okay, if he can't win around the edge, threaten around the edge, if he doesn't have it, does he have the athleticism to then plant and redirect, right? And redirect in his pass rush, and I think he does, right? And when you bring in the arm strength that he has, a rip move, the cross face, again, different things like that, there's a bevy of things that you can do. I mean, I even go back to Will Anderson. And Will Anderson is all pro caliber type football player. He, like, had no concerns about him. Well, let me say this. He great player. I'm not surprised that everything translated for him, right? Like that he's dominating the NFL. But the part that lacked on tape was a similar type thing for Will Anderson. If you remember, DP, there was not a lot of like true pass rush sets, right? And he was another power guy, right? But you see that power wins in the NFL. It does, point blank, period, right? And especially when you start to think about these, and we've seen these young men in person talking about these offensive tackles, right? Like when you start to, we're not talking about against the Lane Johnsons of the world and those guys. You're talking about once you get to week 10, and some teams have their backup offensive tackle in, right? Like they got their second and third string. Those guys are not equipped to handle that amount of power, right? Like that's not what they want to do.
Not typically.
There's not a lot of offensive tackles that are playing at a top 10, top 15, and like those guys are gonna pitch shutouts every single week. So I look at Rueben Bain, and that's the concern I have. But because of what Will Anderson was able to do as far as translating to the NFL, I feel more comfortable. Now, if I had to grade them, I probably grade Will higher. I grade Will Anderson higher, but I think that they had some of the same potential concerns overall.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of that. And I think, for me, another concern I think about, he's a great run defender. So that floor, like to me, like people gonna worry about the arm length. We'll cross that bridge when we get there at the combine. We'll get the measurements. We'll know for sure, whatever. But the floor is, like, to me, is a safe prospect because the floor, and what the floor is you're gonna get yourself a really good run defender in the run game. Because he is such a physical and like he has that mentality to dominate opponents. Sometimes he's a bull in the china shop, and it's like he freelances and stuff like that, and he'll give running backs a lane to hit. And I'm like, so in the NFL, and again, I go back to be completely honest, Mario Cristobal and that coaching staff just seems like a coaching staff that say, listen, you're all one of our best players. Do what you do.
Turn them loose.
Turn them loose. Like, let them go do their thing.
And back to the Will Anderson thing, that like it was, and I don't know if you remember when I got on the meeting, right? The first time I evaluated Will Anderson, and I was like, it's different. And I'm like, it's different for Will because Will attacks people. Like he attacks the offensive lineman. Like he runs into them, right? Like even in the run game, it's like he goes and chases them down to go hit them, right? And I'm like, it's different. But I think comparing it to Rueben again, it could be the same type of thing, right? It's like, nah,
Yeah.
like don't make me passive, like allow me to stay aggressive in this. And you got to think about it, right? When we go to disrupting drives, right? Like when you get to 2nd and 13 and 14, you're usually in trouble, right? That means that drive's over. So, okay, cool. Maybe I agree with you with the run game stuff, because I say the same thing. He'll put his head down and he'll run 30 yards up the field, right? Like that's Rueben. That's what he'll do. But the offset of that, DP, is that guess what? If he's able to kill 1 or 2 drives per game, right? Like that, like he's able to dead 2 possessions, because instead of it being 2nd and 10 and the offense feels okay, but it's 2nd and 13 or 14 because he totally blew up a play, then you're like, you know what? I'll take it.
I'll live with it. I'll live with it, right? And I mean, even with Miami, you go on the offensive side of the ball last year with Cam Ward. Like, they didn't try to rein in Cam Ward's playmaking, and they were like, listen, we're living and dying with this because we don't have any other answers but you. So it's like, our defense isn't great. We rely on you. So they allow their players to be the best version of themselves. I think once he gets it with the NFL coaching staff, they're kind of going to hone in on, hey, like we talked about with the quarterbacks, calculated aggressiveness, calculated risks, and understanding, hey, run fit as we design, but hey, we're going to you're going to get your opportunity to pin your ears back and just go. And just being able to iron that aspect out in this game is going to help him a lot in the NFL. Because I mean, heck, you look at the Super Bowl and Kenneth Walker III. You got to be disciplined as a run defender with him, because this is a guy that has lateral agility, jump cuts, and lateral explosiveness. That, hey, if you crash as an edge defender and you don't get to him, jump cut, now he's outside. There's nobody out there waiting on him. And now it's a 15, 20, maybe 30-yard run because he's got open field speed as well. You got, depending on who you're facing in the running game, you just got to be more cognizant of gap integrity and different things like that, because one missed assignment could turn into a 40-yard run in the NFL.
Yep, I agree, DP. You know what we do, man? We've talked pros, we've talked cons. Now that's the best part, right? Because we give out a draft grade. What grade do we currently have on Rueben Bain? We're going to discuss that. Plus, we're going to discuss an NFL comp for Rueben Bain. We talk about that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel, it just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, speed skating, races decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked in to the competition. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot, for being our everydayers. Rueben Bain Jr. with 6'3", 275, 280-pound defensive lineman, defensive end, edge rusher for the Miami Hurricanes. Keith, the grade that I have for Rueben Bain, I have him with an 8.7 over, for using the grading scale we have over at Bleach Report. He's a top 5 player for me in this class. I think this is a destructive force, a dominant player. And again, there's certain, sometimes you run, like if he's at 32 and 7/8 and he just misses the mark. There's some guys it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like some guys, the arm length doesn't. I mean, Tyree Wilson we always talk about Tyree Wilson had some of the longest arms from a defensive end we've seen in recent drafts. How's that helped him? You know what I mean? How's that helped him in the NFL? You got to know how to get to the quarterback. You got to know how to stack, peek, and shed. You got to know and have the ability to dominate the guy across from you. Rueben Bain knows how to do all of those things, and I'm not betting against that guy just because, hey, the measuring tape says he's just a little bit short in the wingspan. I'm trusting what the tape says. I'm trusting what he puts out on film. Comp-wise, Keith, I've ran through 2 different names. One was Melvin Ingram, who was like 6'2", I think it was like 250, maybe 260 at one point when he came out of college. and everything, Melvin Ingram. But the one I really liked was Brandon Graham, who was with the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champion. He had the strip sack against Tom when Tom had over 500 yards passing and helped Nick Foles secure that victory in the Super Bowl. Without Brandon Graham, they lose that game more times than not, like more than likely. You know what I mean? Tom was cooking. Brandon Graham got in there, got the sack, but it was that ability to play. We talked about Rueben. You can play that defensive end, that kind of outside shade, but also can work you down inside, be the guard crossface, and you're right there in the face of the quarterback. I think the Brandon Graham one is the one I'm going to stick with probably most.
I like that, DP, because the truth of the matter is, right, there's not a lot of 207, like 6'3", 275 edge rushers, right? There's just not a lot of them out there. I'm going to probably be more upside with this, and I'm gonna explain. So first, I'm explaining my comp. But first, let me get to my grade. My grade, I gave him 87.5, right? Which that's a Pro Bowl caliber, right? It's not rare all pro, but that's Pro Bowl caliber. But consistently living in that space, and that's that to me, that's usually a top 10 grade in an entire class, right? Even if it's a really deep class, that's a good overall grade. When I get to the NFL comp, I mentioned it a couple of times, and I think I'm gonna go with this again. And when I say this comp, I'm gonna get into the numbers because I want people to pay attention to career arc and career trajectory also, right? The guy I'm going to go with is Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan at this point is probably very similar measures. He's listed as 6'4", 287 pounds, okay, as an edge rusher. And then I think he was taken in the middle of the 2011 draft. It wasn't high. He wasn't a top 10 pick. I want to say he was like 15 to 20, somewhere in there. You can fact check me. And then let's go with this, right? For a career arc and understanding what I think Rueben Bain could enter the NFL in, and then the type of numbers he could evolve to, right? Like once he understands the game at a more in-depth level. So 2011 is rookie year. Cameron Jordan had 1 sack, right? And I'm going to just roll down the years and tell you the sack amounts, okay? So 2011, he had 1 sack. 2012, he had 8 sacks. 2013, his third year in the league, he had 12.5. 2014, he had 7.5. 2015, he had 10 sacks. 2016 was 7.5. And then if you look at this 2017 to 2019 stretch, he went 13, 12, and 15.5 sacks in 2019. So what I hope what people understand is that I was saying that I think it's going to be a career arc, meaning that he's going to get in the NFL and he's going to have to learn, right? He's going to have to become more in depth as a pass rusher, but he's also going to have to learn how he's going to win. I don't expect him to enter the NFL and immediately do double digits, right? That's not why you're drafting him. But do I think he can get there? Yes. I think with the right mentorship, he can be a consistent guy. And when we look at Cam Jordan, like take a step back and let's ask ourselves, is Cam Jordan a Hall of Famer? Yes. Has he played 15 years in the NFL? Yes. Well, hey, if that's a comparable player, right, as far as skill sets and what they provide, and Cameron Jordan by no means scared defenders with speed around the edge, right? This guy's 285 pounds, he's running through you. But he's finding different ways to get the job done. So I'm gonna go with Cameron Jordan on this comp because they compare a lot in as far as height and weight, but also the career trajectory that I could see Rueben Bain taking when we talk about sack production.
No, and that's one that's crossed my mind as well. And I think, I think to your point when you talk about, Cam was the 24th pick in his draft. You know what I mean? Like he fell at 24, and I'm pretty sure there's quite a few guys that drafted in front of him that he's much better than. You know what I mean?
And in that draft, that 2011, I'm gonna pull it up. Was a ridiculous draft also.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was one of them. Like
I think that was the Cam Newton, JJ Watt. It was crazy.
Just an insane. Like, anytime we get draft classes like that, that's what makes this job fun, in general, when you get a draft class that loaded. But yeah, man, I like that comp. Keith DP, Cam had 35-inch arms. Yes, we know. Like, Cam had longer arms. But the simple fact of the matter is Cam won in similar ways that Rueben Bain wins. You know what I mean? Like the power, the working through you, hand usage. Like, Cam is one of the most refined pass rushers that we've seen. Like, and to be able to win without having that elite, dominant, athletic trait. Like, listen, Von Miller, That's why every time you bring up that quote, Vaughn, I'm like, Vaughn, that quote works for you, big dog, because you are one of one. There's not many yous out here. Right. Every time we see a guy built like you that Harold Landry, people thought that, that's Vaughn Miller. Like, nope. Vaughn is Vaughn. Like, there's no other Vaughn Miller. We may not see that type of guy probably ever again that just had the bend, the explosiveness, all of it, right? But not having those elite traits, like those elite athletic traits, Cam Jordan still is like, I think Matt Ryan talked about, like, man, I'm pretty sure I'm most of his sacks. Like, when he played for the Falcons, it was just like he knows how to get home. And I think getting Rueben Bain with a pass rush, a coach that's going in the NFL that's going to work with him, consistently dial in on just the technical aspects of it, right? And I think honestly, there's so much meat left on the bone in terms of counters. I think you could get a spin, like an inside spin off of the outside rush from a Rueben Bain. I think there's more that he can develop into with his pass rush off the edge. And we know that he knows how to work crossface and overpower guards and different things of that nature if he's playing that 3 to 4 tech. Yeah, for me, like I said, top 5, top 10 player. If you hit Brandon Graham as a career arc, or you hit Cam Jordan, either way, you successful, big dog. You know what I mean? One's a Super Bowl champion, one's going in the Hall of Fame. Both of them are highly productive. So I think Rueben Bain kind of fits both of those, or somewhere in the middle, honestly, between the two guys.
Yep, I agree with that, DP, and I'm gonna, because I mentioned the 2011 class. I'm gonna just give our listeners just a little nugget real quick before we wrap up. You had Cam Newton go number 1. You had Von Miller number 2. You had Marcel Darius number 3. AJ Green 4. Patrick Peterson 5. Julio Jones 6. Alden Smith, which we know the type of career trajectory he was on, at 7. Yeah. Then at 9, you had Tyron Smith. You had J.J. Watt at 11. You had Robert Quinn, who, by the way, has 100 sacks in his career, at 14. You had Mike Pouncey at 15. You had Prince Amukamara at 19. And then you had Cameron Jordan at 24. And then to wrap it up, DP, Cameron Hayward was picked 31. So, yeah, you talk about a ridiculous draft class. That's a ridiculous draft class right there. That
first round like that?
Yeah, it has 3 guys who has 100+ sacks in their career, and Cameron Hayward has 92 sacks. So they're
that is insane. Yeah. That's a crazy. Yeah, that's a nugget for you. That's a nugget.
Yeah, that's an all-time draft class. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all gonna talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. On tomorrow's show, guys, we're getting into David Bailey. We're going to talk about more of these edge rushers. We're going to break down the pros, the cons, explain the grade, and give you the NFL comps for another potential top 10 edge rusher in this class. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.